That person you're sitting across the table from, they may not be the decision maker. That doesn't mean they're not important. We're going to talk about the decision-making process, figuring that out with Thon, next on Purpose Under Pressure. Welcome back. My name is Brian, and this is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about developing sales and leadership success on purpose while you're under pressure. It's brought to you by the professional sales and leadership training team at Sandler by the Ruby Group. You'll find them in Akron and in Columbus, Ohio. They're in Jacksonville, Florida. They're in Capital Region, New York. They do their work on purpose so that you and your team can represent that way. Why are they sponsors of this show? Why are we partners? Well, Purpose Under Pressure. When things get hard, it gets easy to take a shortcut. It gets easy to say, I won't worry about that principle right now. I need to close this deal. When things get hard, when things get under pressure, we can take shortcuts and we can lose our purpose. And that's the bad road. And I want to try to convince you that it's worth sticking to your purpose. And the folks at Sandler by the Ruby Group want to do the exact same thing. We're trying to build organizations that last. We're trying to build organizations on purpose. We're trying to drive revenue that means something to everyone. That's what it's all about. That's what the show's about. That's what they're about. And if that's what you're about, you should reach out to Sandler by the Ruby Group. You can connect with them online at therubygroup.sandler.com. The Ruby Group, developing stronger sales teams for tougher conversations. So let's get cooking, folks. There is always someone in a sales decision-making process whose input matters more than the person you're talking to. I can almost guarantee you. But the problem is finding out who that person is and what role they play in the decision-making process. There's no roadmap. Just, when you're done pitching, realize that your prospect is about to start pitching and start that decision-making process with someone who has no idea what's going on. And so you need to convince them to share with you where this is going to go. What I'm talking about here is making decisions. Let's talk about that with partner and trainer at Sandler by the Ruby Group, Thon. Thom, welcome to Purpose Under Pressure.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be with you.
I'm really glad you're here, and I want to talk about this thing because we think we're on the right path, and then the path switches because we don't know where the path is going to go from there. Does that make sense? More than just one person gets to say yes nowadays, and that makes the decision-making process really complicated. Am I on it?
You are on it. And it is oftentimes an overlooked step of companies' sales processes relative to, well, I've dotted this I, crossed that T. They think they're done, where in fact they've given all of their information to their prospect and they are not setting the next step. And even before that, to your point, Brian, and why we're here today, is they don't understand how this business is going to go about making a decision, yay or nay, for my product.
And it's the same. There aren't any. Very rarely is the person you're talking to the only person in the decision-making process. It's very rare that it's a one-call close or that kind of thing. But yet we forget that there's other people, that there's a process. Why can't a salesperson understand that there's more going on behind the surface than we're giving credit to?
Well, the low-hanging fruit answer is lack of training, the Sandler guy says, of course.
That's right.
But it really is probably more lack of awareness of how important it is to understand how these businesses make investment decisions. And if we don't have our antennas up and are asking the right questions to, one, protect okayness in a nurturing way, because oftentimes we as sellers are sent, I call them the messenger. The messenger represents the business to get all the information, but oftentimes has very little influence on the decision because the decision maker told the messenger to reach out to me and get the information. So I have to recognize that, and I have to, through a line of important, thoughtful, and meaningful questions, understand what's really going on here in terms of them deciding whether or not to do business with me.
Can you give us an example of some kind of a meaningful question? How might a salesperson go about bridging that gap and starting to uncover some of the pieces of the puzzle?
So a pro tip question is along the lines of, John, since we haven't worked together before, can you share with me how your company goes about making these type of decisions? Very open-ended, looking for some direction from John relative to how, in fact, they do make decisions.
And is John typically not asked that question? And so is he usually kind of, I'm not sure, I'm not willing to share? What's the experience level on the other side of that?
That's a really good question. And the answer is all of the above. Especially when we as salespeople are dealing with procurement, those are professional buyers that lack any emotional attachment. And typically it's in a demand fulfillment environment, meaning Starbucks has a fulfillment buying division because they have to have coffee beans.
Mhm.
Many clients of Sandler are in the demand creation business where that good and service isn't necessarily a requirement to do business. And so we have to make sure we know what we're selling in the spirit of demand creation or demand fulfillment a la coffee beans, because that will dictate, the path that we go down and the questions that we ask to try to understand decision-making processes.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine that when the buyer or the buyer persona that the real buyer sent to the salesperson, I imagine that when they go back to the buyer and say, look, this is what they said, this is what they said, now the real buyer has to dig deeper because they don't have all the questions. Why the mystery? Why did they send that person to us in the first place? Why do I have to go through the hoops to figure this process out?
Because as buyers in a previous life or even on a personal basis, many buyers have been burned and the cards immediately go close to the vest and they send the messenger just to get the data and the information and the investment or pricing levels because they don't want to be put in an uncomfortable position. A lot of buyers like to buy, but they don't like to be sold. And salespeople that don't recognize the difference come off as pushy and aggressive and not caring and just trying to get the deal done as quickly as possible, where they have no awareness of how this buyer likes to buy.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's always that's the bane of a salesperson is the last salesperson that came in before you. It's always put on to us. Their lack of professionalism, it comes out and people think that we're going to be that way too. And that's unfortunate. But I guess that's why you guys are there to help people kind of break that cycle.
We try to break the cycle of vendor in the eyes and ears of our prospects and bridge the gap and reach the promised land of trusted advisor. And that takes time.
It takes time. It takes effort and realization that that has to happen. And sometimes, I mean, if we're going to be professionals, this is going to start working. So when we talk to the person and say, so what's the decision-making process? And we've built the relationship, they'll share it with us. And sooner or later, we kind of figure out what the roadmap is. Let's say there's 5 and there could be 20, but 5 different steps, 5 different people that I need to kind of work things through. Is it on a salesperson to develop a relationship with all 5, 5 different types of people and 5 different questions? How can I be the best salesperson through their process, even though I'm not fully tangent with it?
Yes, great question. The first thing that comes to mind is 5 individual boxes to check is a pretty long sales process. Now, in some situations, that's how that business may buy. Do I have a responsibility to attempt to build a relationship with each one? Absolutely. Now, their process may not allow that. Procurement, for instance, doesn't allow relationships. They're just looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
But if it's a relatively small business and where the CEO will end up making the decision, it's committee, it's very collaborative in nature, then yeah, we have to recognize that and understand that if you say yes, what happens next? And then in your example, 4 more steps to get to a total of 5 decision makers. We have to be patient with that. We have to recognize how they like to communicate. And the other point that comes to mind is, why do they do it that way? Why are there 5 steps and 5 different people? You know, the why is something we talk about a lot. Why do they even have an interest in my business? What's the why?
Yeah, why is it such a demanding chain, and why do I have to jump through many hoops? And I think asking those questions can develop a relationship. I also wonder if asking those questions can limit. For instance, if I'm talking to someone who's not the buyer, not the decision maker, but there's no way I'm getting through this person, can I offend this person by saying, well, shouldn't I be talking to someone else? How do I handle that kind of an issue?
You absolutely could offend.
Yeah.
Here's the pro tip question. Write this one down, ladies and gentlemen. And the question to ask is, other than yourself, who will be involved in making this decision? Even if they've got no skin in the game, I'm protecting what we call their okayness, giving them cred, but I still got to figure out who's got the ball here in terms of making the decision.
I love that. That just made me feel good just hearing it out of your mouth. That made me feel important, which I am, but also part of the process, which I may or may not be. And I just think that's amazing. See, folks, that's the kind of thing we learn here on Purpose Under Pressure. That's the things we learn from Sandler by the Ruby Group. Tom, if someone wanted to reach out and talk to you about these things or anything, how would they do that?
Just go to that Sandler Ruby Group website and we'll respond upon receipt and see if it would make sense for us to have a conversation and help your sales process and understanding the decision-making process.
Tom, thanks for joining us on Purpose Under Pressure.
Good being with you. Thank you again, Brian.
That's Tom Thon. He's partner and trainer at Sandler by the Ruby Group. And it's just so much fun to pick the brains of these folks that have been through the wars. They've been through the pressure. They're on the other side helping others do the exact same thing. And I just think it's an amazing opportunity. And I get to do it all the time. I think you should too. I think you should reach out to those folks at Sandler by the Ruby Group. Folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. We do this every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And if you're subscribed, you won't miss one. So go ahead and do that. Maybe tell a friend so that they can be on purpose too. You'll find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at brianmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. It's brought to you by the Ruby Group, developing stronger sales teams for tougher conversations. And until next time, no matter how high the pressure gets, just stay on purpose.